My name is Inafune. I work for Capcom. Nice to meet all of you. Today I'm going to talk about our new game, Shadow of Rome, which features ancient Rome at its peak. We basically started the project about a year and a half ago, but the actual time in actual development of the game has been about a year. I think personally that the period of making games only for Japan, only for our market, and then sending them over to America and just selling them as an afterthought, I think that time period is now ended probably. So now, as game developers, we really have to start making games that cater more to the Western audience. And I guess you could say that this Shadow of Rome is kind of our first attempt at trying to cater to the Western audience and see if it'll work or not. The basic story behind Shadow of Rome is that the main character, his father, is arrested in ancient Rome, actually around the time Julius Caesar was around. Julius Caesar, of course, gets assassinated, as he did in real history. And unfortunately, the main character's father is arrested falsely for the assassination of Julius Caesar. So the main character and his best friend both take separate routes to try and figure out who the actual killer is, who actually truly assassinated Julius Caesar, and what actually went down during the assassination. One of the characters is a gladiator, and he fights his way through to get to the answers. And the other character is more a smart character, and he sort of is the detective of the two and digs his way to get to the answers, digs his way down to the truth, and he kind of sneaks around and overhears conversations, and there's sort of like that kind of stealth element to him. Depending on which character you're playing as, one character has definitely a greater emphasis on action, whereas the other character has a greater emphasis on exploration and adventure. So depending on how you play the game, which character you choose to focus on, you're going to have more of an action game that you have played, or you're going to have more of an adventure exploration type game. What we have done is made it so that if you're playing the action stages and you're clearing them easily, new scenarios open up, new stages open up, that perhaps if it takes you longer, or perhaps we'll give you a chance to choose them or not choose them, they may appear or may not appear. Both the adventure and the action sides intertwine with each other, and you go back and forth between both different characters as you play through the game. However, the number of scenarios that open up for each character will depend on how well you play that part of either the action side or the adventure side. Unfortunately, the main character, he is a gladiator. He lives in the gladiator world, which means he cannot mingle with the normal people, with the normal citizens. His friend, however, does happen to be a normal citizen. So his friend, the only time they actually talk with each other is when his friend sneaks in to see him. But they're not actually capable to fight along with each other. So just by the fact that the story limits them from actually interaction, like in that style, no, there's not going to be any simultaneous multiplayer. This development team originally developed Onimusha 2. And as you know, Onimusha 2 was a game where they turned the original total action game into a more RPG sort of adventure type game. We see this Shadow of Rome as the next step of evolution of their skills as creating action adventure games. Shadow of Rome uses the Onimusha 3 engine in answering your question about what type of graphics engine we've got here. In fact, the Onimusha 3 engine took a long time to develop, and we really developed it and polished it to the point where we really don't think you're going to get much better graphics out of the PlayStation 2. I mean, that is the peak, the limit. We are pushing every polygon we can possibly with that engine. So using that as a basis, we developed it, added other filters, put a lot of cool effects into it, and it's kind of like maybe the next stage, or you could say probably a dressed-up version of the Onimusha 3 engine. That doesn't necessarily mean it's better. It just means we're using more filters on the on the Shadow of Rome game engine, so it looks a lot better, we think, in that aspect. What we did is we went back, studied a lot of different historical resources to see what kind of fighting was actually done in ancient Rome. Of course, it's not just sword fighting. It's not just one man with a sword fighting another man with a sword. There were a lot of different games, a lot of different competitions that they did back in ancient Rome during the gladiator days. And so we've tried to realize each one of those in the game. So you are going to see one man versus another man, or you're going to see one man versus many men. There's going to be races. There's a lot of different competitions that they held in these arenas, and we've spent a lot of time exploring them and seeing which ones we could put into the game, which ones we couldn't. And you really have a lot of variety just on the action side alone. It's not just going to be a man fighting another man. You're going to see a lot of different variety in it. There's going to be a scene where you're actually fighting on an ocean, and you have to lay siege to the other person's boat and attack it. So there's just a ton of variety that we've really shoved into this game. And one thing we've tried to make sure is that the controls for every single scene, every single event are the same, so that you're not having to memorize 8,000 different controls depending on the different fighting that you're doing. So we've kind of developed a simple control system. And by simple, I don't mean it's just you're pressing one button or two buttons. There are, of course, different multiple attacks and special moves and things like that. But it's simple in the fact that it's really intuitive, and you play it, and then you go to a different scene. You may be doing something totally different, but it's really easy to pick up. And it's something that even people that are not ultra-hardcore gamers will also be able to understand and grasp, we think. What the stealth aspect of the game is all about is using your brain. He's not a big guy. He's not a strong guy. He's a little guy who's your average, everyday Joe. He has to use his brain. He has to use all the items that are there right in front of him. Maybe he'll see a piece of rope in front of him, and he'll have to think how he can utilize that. Or maybe he'll see some kind of way to make a Molotov cocktails in order to attack the enemy. He's not a highly trained operative. He doesn't have guns. He has to all do it with his wits. And so using his wits and by sneaking around and not getting caught, he can slowly infiltrate the palace and get information, that which the main character couldn't, since he's stuck in the gladiator world. Of course, there are going to be some times where he can grab costumes, and while he's really scared, nervous, he's going to get caught, slowly walk past other people undetected, hopefully. So there's going to be a lot of using your brain on that side of the game. Currently, one of the ways we're thinking of making the gameplay experience a lot deeper is that, for example, let's say you're fighting in the arena and you're used to fighting one-on-one. One of the paths that you may open is that you're going to fight one versus more than one, or some of the items that are actually laying there on the field, because that's all you can really use, or what's actually there. Maybe sometimes there'll be different items, or maybe there'll be different traps that you didn't see before that you can utilize. So the more you play the game, the deeper you're going to see, understand each stage and what it has to offer, and perhaps how that stage will change, and sometimes you'll be fighting a lot more people than you ever were used to, and so you'll have to increase your skill at the game as you play further and further into it. As far as the actual story goes, though, we had planned a story like a book, where you're going to have this happens, this happens, this happens. So when you get to the end, it is going to be one fixed ending. We really aren't thinking right now of multiple endings. And we have it sort of like built like a movie, in the fact that you're going to have an intro, and then a rising action, a climax, and in the end you're going to have the actual official ending. So that's what we're kind of aiming at with this game. To go into a little more detail into what kind of weapons or collectible or items that each character is actually going to be interacting with, the main character, the gladiator character of the game, he doesn't have a weapon that he continually powers up, and so he like has a +1 longsword, a +2 longsword, anything like that. The weapons in the game are merely things for him to use, and they're not things for him to necessarily rely on, or not things for him to actually raise or power up. Basically, you'll use a weapon until perhaps that breaks, or you lose that weapon, and then you can just grab another weapon from an enemy that you've defeated. If I were going to say if there's one thing I would like the average player to take away from this gameplay experience, would be that you are a gladiator, and you are this gladiator's friend that is sneaking through the castle. But more importantly, up until now, games have been about looking cool in doing certain things. I guess the game world is not reality. It's people want to be able to do things that they couldn't do in real reality, that they can do in a gaming world. And that's fine for us, but we want to put an emphasis on survival. You can just barely make it by the skin of your teeth, but so long as you live and continue to fight and proceed forward, it's not about appearance or image. It's about imagining being in that location. Here you are, you can only use the weapons in front of you. There's no magic, there's nothing. I mean, this is what real gladiators had to go through every day. This is something that, in fact, real humans did back in the day. They really did fight against tigers sometimes. They really did lay siege to these big castles and fight on boats and all that. These are the great stories of the past that really actual humans did back then, and that's what we kind of want them to be able to experience with this game.